Now, this I'm excited about because I love the Final Fantasy series.
All right.
And I have a lot of viewers who also love Final Fantasy. And the developers over at Square Enix love Latin names. And I suspect because they know they sound very cool, especially if you don't know any Latin, but these names just sound really cool. And so there's quite a bit of Final Fantasy games that have very long Latin names. The question is, do they make any sense? And are we even close to pronouncing them correctly? And this trend really started a few years ago with a trilogy of games for Final Fantasy 13 called Fabula Nova Crystallis. And I'm curious to know how to pronounce that, and does that make any sense? I something new crystals or something crystals?
Yeah. So fabula is what I would. That's how I would anglicize it because it's fabula. Stress on the
Right.
fa. So fabula is how I would anglicize it. Um, and like people will say like tabula rasa, or instead of tabula rasa, which would be tabula rasa, the Latin version. But yeah, fabula noa crystallis or crystallis. Um, yeah, those are words. It's a
Do they
title.
mean anything? What do
News
these words mean?
story, crystal. It's fine. It's a name. I mean, it doesn't. I don't know if it's supposed to mean something really specific. It's not clear to me. But
Oh,
fabula noa means news story.
okay.
Crystallis, crystal things.
Crystal things. Okay. Within that series, one of the games, the whole story behind this trilogy is fascinating. But one of the original games was supposed to be Final Fantasy Agido.
Okay, and we're sure it's not Japanese. Just checking, or a
Yes,
made up name.
these are all supposed to be Latin names, I believe.
Okay. Well, agito is a verb, agitare, which means to agitate, to excite, could mean to entice, to move, to drive. Agitare, it's the frequentative form of agere, which means to act or to do. And agito or agito, ecclesiastical pronunciation. If that is a Latin word, if it's meant to be something else, I don't know, but that's an actual Latin word.
Okay, that's
Agito.
Agito. Okay, and then we're going to move on to Final Fantasy 15, one of the more recent games. I can't believe there have been, and now a 16th game is coming out. It makes me feel so old. I played the original game, and 16 games later.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, it's crazy. But Final
Mm.
Fantasy 15 is notorious for having a lot of Latin names.
Mm.
And the protagonist, who's sort of this dark emo type boy band teenager, he is Prince Noctis Lucis Caelum. So
Mm-hmm.
I sent you the name, and I'm curious to
Oh,
know if this
yeah.
means anything. I think Noctis is like night or darkness. I'm not sure.
Nox is the word for night, nox, which is noche in Spanish, like buenas noches, and notte in Italian. Noctis is the genitive or possessive form of that name, so that means of the night. Lucis is the genitive or possessive form of the word lux, which means light. Luth in Spanish, luce in Italian. So noctis lucis, which would mean of the night's light. So it's possessive, the whole thing. And then caelum is the sky or heaven. So caelum, caelum in ecclesiastical pronunciation. So noctis lucis caelum would be the heaven of night of the light, the heaven of the light of the night.
Okay.
So it's
I
literally
mean,
what those things mean.
literally what it means.
It's
Okay.
it works grammatically. It's not, shocking. So
And then one of his companions is Gladiolus Amicitia.
mhm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean English. Who knows? We could pronounce it any way we want. For the most part. Amicitia is friendship, or amicitia in ecclesiastical pronunciation. And the first word, gladiolus, the accent is on the letter I in Latin. Gladiolus means a little gladius, so little sword. That's a word. And then the next word is amicitia, friendship, little sword, friendship. That's all that means. That is, it doesn't particularly convey a lot of meaning. They just happen to be two nouns in apposition. that's from the Latin ad ponere, to put next to. So the apposition means, you could say, for example, it could be, I don't know, that could be a motto on a shield. Gladiolus amicitia. The little sword is, which we're not saying, but the little sword is friendship.
Well,
now that doesn't mean a lot to me, but maybe it does.
Well,
whoever...
I'm trying to. It's been so long since I've played the game. That's why I feel bad about just messing up the names entirely. But I do remember that that's one of Noctis's really good friends, and so he's sort of a sworn sword to Noctis, and they do have a very strong bond. So maybe that's the meaning behind it. That's what I'm thinking now that you've translated it.
It's, I mean, so far none of these really work as actual names of anything in normal usage of Latin, but it's not shockingly bad.
Okay. Okay, that's good. We'll go with that. And then we have another one of Noctis's close friends, which is Ignis Scientia.
Ignis Scientia, Ignis Scientia in the ecclesiastical pronunciation. Ignis means fire. Scientia means knowledge. That's where science comes from. Science just means scientia, which means knowledge. Scire means to know. Scientia. So those are just two words, also an apposition again. They're not really connected. That would be like saying fire is knowledge, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. It doesn't mean, like, it could, like, maybe the person was thinking, oh, I want to say fire of knowledge, but it doesn't mean that, because it have to be scientia.
All right, well, maybe I think that's the character who's really good at cooking, so maybe it has something to do with the cook fire. It sounds cool, though.
You know what? I did think of something to try to save it a little bit better. Ignis is also possessive as well as the nominative, so it could mean the knowledge of fire. Again, these are not normal names at all. These are really odd to be names of people. Right. Yeah. But
again, it sounds cool. Maybe they're suggesting that this person is knowledgeable about the ways.
I definitely rate this higher than Harry Potter Latin so far.
Okay, excellent. A point in Final Fantasy's favor.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And then we have Prompto Argentum.
Argentum. Absolutely. Prompto Argentum, ecclesiastical. Prompto Argentum, classical pronunciation. Prompto. So there's the adjective promptus, which means ready, prompt, something that's at hand, promptus. Adding the suffix o is actually a fairly common thing to do for names. Like naso means a big nasus, big nose. And promptus, prompto could be like the guy who's ready, and he's not a large fellow. I don't know. He's like also kikero, because kiker means chickpea. Kikero, Cicero, means big chickpea. Huh. Almost all those names that we think of as those last names, usually the third name or the cognomen in Latin, almost all of them are pejorative in origin. Like they're from a nickname that they had either from their military time, where they were teased and made fun of, as military folks will do. Just like call signs. Actually, it's very similar to call signs for pilots. Like the Hollywood style call signs, like you hear in Top Gun, for example, are rather glamorous. For the most part, call signs among military pilots are very, they have some kind of really embarrassing story behind them, or they're obviously not very nice. Like I knew one guy who was Socrates. It was Socrates.
Socrates.
But the Bill and Ted reference, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, he was from California, and yeah, it's like, hey man, C-130 pilot. Yeah, and I go by Socrates. And then it made sense. The reason why is because he talks like that, talks like Bill and Ted. That's just his voice. And so he was being made fun of. So it seems kind of like it should be, normally the call signs are meant to be a name which can they can sound like normal. They're not saying like that bad, but they have something embarrassing behind them, or meant to tease. So kikoro, a big chickpea. Chickpea is a stupid little useless thing. A kikoro, a big chickpea. Okay. Naso, big nose. These are not the nicest names.
That's hilarious. No, my friends and I would sometimes say Socrates deliberately wrong because we just thought it was really funny, and it helped you remember how to spell the name.
I mean, honestly, Socrates is a perfectly cromulent way to pronounce that name. in English.
It's a perfectly cromulent word.
From yeah, I'm glad you like the Simpsons reference. Good.
So back on track though with Latin. Another name that appears in Final Fantasy 15 is Corleonis. Corleonis.
Yeah, the origin of Corleone, which is a French name, literally means heart of the lion, heart of a lion, cor, heart, and leonis, of the lion, lion heart.
Very nice. That's a nice name. That's a cool name to have. And it seems to make sense, at least.
Yeah, I'm fine with that one.
You're fine with that one. Okay. I'm actually going to move on to Final Fantasy 14. Final Fantasy 14 is a hugely popular game that I am playing. It's an online game. And it also has a lot of names. Now, admittedly, most of these names feel like they were put in a name generator or just tossed as a word salad. I have no idea about these names. Some are like a mix of different regions and languages. But
I'm looking up one now to see if it, nope, not in Greek. Just wanted to check.
Okay, yeah, because I was like, I don't even know if these are Latin. Gaius van Baelsar.
Baelsar is not, wait, let me just check.
I don't think that's Latin at all. Is it?
No, I just want to make sure it wasn't, in somewhere in classical Latin. No, it looks something like a Gaulish or Germanic name that's been adapted into Latin, assuming it's Latin at all, or like a medieval name. Of course, the van is Low German word, which means from, van, or like which in German standard modern High German, which is von, means from, and van is the word in Dutch, for example, today. So, but the Low German, because languages have a continuum, like High German is from essentially the Alps originally. I don't actually remember the history exactly, but they have this continuum from like southern Germany all the way up to the Netherlands, and technically also into England. Those are the Germanic languages, and they're on this continuum. Simon Roper actually has a great video demonstrating that if you go like, it's on the spectrum, and if you find these little towns where they still speak the dialects, you can kind of get these mutual intelligibility things as you go from one to the other, kind of skipping along. Italy has the same thing. But van is a Low German, the Low German language's word for from. Gaius is just Gaius, and Baelsar. I mean, I don't mind it. It looks like a name, looks like a medieval name.
It does. It looks very medieval, and this game
like
does
Holy
have
Roman Empire.
a medieval theme. So, and then just a couple of more names out of Final Fantasy. So Final Fantasy VI is very hailed as one of the best role-playing games, Japanese role-playing games of all time. And two of its main characters, in Japanese, it's Tina and Celeste. And in English, they changed Terra, Tina to Terra, probably because Terra means, I guess, earth, and Celeste means sky.
Well, yeah, terra is the earth, dirt, the world. Tina, so it's Tina in Japanese?
It's Tina in Japanese. They changed it to Terra, but if you put it together, it's like Celestina, which I guess might mean heavenly.
Celestina is an adjective meaning, yes, caelestinus would be the Latin version. Yeah, because the that letter E is in the first part of the word. If it is from the word sky, like we see caelum or caelum, the AE in the other names, that means sky, caelum or caelum. That's the standard spelling with the two pronunciations. And that AE, that I diphthong flattens out to the monophthong E in late Latin and through the medieval and Renaissance and so forth. It's only restored to I in the past couple hundred years as we have learned more about the ancient pronunciation of Latin and so forth. So spelling it without the A is a non-standard but very common way that the diphthong I was rendered as just an A because they weren't pronouncing it I anymore. But Caelestina, Celestina with an AE is what would be more standard if it were standard Latin spelling. But a non-standard medieval spelling could be with just the E. But yeah, Caelestina or Celestina. Geles on its own is an adjective meaning a racer, and it's from Greek geles.
Huh.
Like a racehorse.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That is very interesting. Okay, good. Now we finally have the origin of those, possible origin of those names, because I always wondered about that.
I think we're
there's
putting much more time into it than they did when they chose.
Oh,
this place.
absolutely. They just thought it looked really cool. But hey,
Yeah,
you know
which is
what?
fine.
It's fun to speculate. Another name that really throws me from Final Fantasy VIII is the name Quistis.
That makes two of us.
It's
I got nothing for
supposedly
that one.
you got nothing for that
These
one.
are letters that happen in Latin and often in this order, just not this particular word.
All right, so this is one of those things where it sounds like ancient Latin, but
Yep.
but nothing.
Nope.
All right, sorry, Quistis. She is one of my favorite characters in Final Fantasy VIII, but her name is just gobbledygook. All right, and then
Yeah, I mean, as far as it being actual attested Latin words, there's no, like, because there's plenty of Latin names that are taken from vernacular languages, Germanic, Gaulish, and so forth, like Vercingetorix, for example,
right.
just to name a historical figure where that's a Latinization of a Gaulish name. So that's as much charity as I can give that. Otherwise, it's not a Latin word.
Okay, and our final Final Fantasy word is a famous town in Final Fantasy I, and also the name of a character in a later Final Fantasy game, Cornelia.
Yeah, English. We usually say Cornelia, right? Or
right,
as
Cornelia.
a name. But you said like Cornelia is the Latin pronunciation.
Yeah.
Yeah, very important family name, Cornelius, Cornelia. And probably, I don't know, we talked about it. Rome was really interesting and weird in a fascinating way with names, because essentially no one had their own name in the same way that we do, and the same way that in the way that the ancient Greeks seem to have very individual names. Whereas, you know, it was, I don't know, Pericles, son of, I can't remember who Pericles' father was, you know, or
Xanthopus.
Thank you, very good. Or Theseus, son of Aegeus, or something like that. Those kinds of, that's how they would normally do it, which is actually still how they do it in Icelandic, which is super cool. Latin, though, there's a given praenomen, and there's really only about 10 praenomina, prenames, that are used commonly, and they're really just to distinguish siblings. It's like Gaius, Marcus, Lucius, Octavus. What are some others? Quintus. There's very, very few. Decimus. Very, very few of them even like survive into the classical period, and they just kind of reuse them again and again. So, like Augustus had two heirs, Lucius Julius Caesar and Gaius Julius Caesar were two young boys who were probably killed by his wife Livia, not the but they were, I think, were they the children of Julia, his daughter? Anyway, but they're like famous because they have these lovely little statues, which I've seen the originals, which are in Rome, which are really cool, of these little boys. They're going to be the heirs of Rome. I got super killed, or at least they died. They died of unknown circumstances when they were young. But it's interesting because we just see the same names used again and again. So basically, everyone in that line was Julius Caesar. But that wasn't unique to just try to keep this family dynasty thing. That's just how it was. So, like, the father of Marcus Tullius Cicero was also Tullius Cicero, because both of those names are just brought down the family line. So that Tullius, which is the gens or gens, the family name, is really the tribe's name from the ancient tribes. So everybody's called Tullius. The father's called Tullius. His son is called Tullius. If he has more than one son, he's also called Tullius. They're all called Tullius. And a praenomen is never a name that's common. Like, we think of it as like, oh, Mark or Lucius, or, those are Quintus. Those are kind of like normalish English names as first names, but they never really use them as something other than identifying, like Gaius Julius Caesar. No one's going to call him Gaius, except someone who knew him when he was a boy. It's too familiar. It's too like, why are you calling me by my boyish boy name? That's odd. His name is Julius Caesar. That's how anyone would address him. So that's really weird, because Julius Caesar had he had one daughter, which was Julia. Octavian, or Augustus, also had a daughter called Julia. And why? Because their tribal name is always Julius or Julia. So every single person in the family has the same name, just feminized or masculinized respectively. Julius or Julia, Tullius or Tullia, Antonius, Antonia, Antonia, another important figure, Antonia, Antonina. Like it's very annoying. Because if they all have the same name, it becomes difficult to tell them apart. And that's one of the reasons why we call the emperors the names that we do traditionally: Claudius, Nero, Caligula. Most of them had the same exact name, almost, but maybe slightly different order or something. Yep.
You know what's so interesting about that is I actually did a video for Ghost of Tsushima, and it was all about how the real history behind that time period, and how samurai would actually have their childhood name, and then there would be a ceremony to give them their adult name. So Hojo
Yes.
Tokimune's name was not Tokimune originally. It was something else, and then he was given that name, which was like a combination of like the shogun's, the prince's name, and part of the, you know, Tokisuke, Tokiyori, just part of that family name as well. So it kind of reminds me of that, where it's just like you didn't have the same name as you had as a kid, because that was, it's not like personal names these days where you know, my name is Megan forever and ever, unless I, you know, decide to legally change it. So
Indeed. Right. Or also in North America, we usually have middle names.
yes.
Not so in, say, Italy. The fact that I have a middle name is confusing. It's like, is that part of your first name? It's like, no, but it's on your passport. Like, yeah, but it's like just Luke Ranieri. I mean, that the middle name is almost irrelevant. The middle name is a little bit like that praenomen, like Gaius or Marcus in Latin. It's going to have this separate additional identifier that's almost superfluous.
Yeah.
But yeah, naming
And
customs are oddly various.
All right, that was awesome. That was a lot of fun. I learned a lot about Latin and the pronunciation of some of these names, and I learned that Quintus is a name, but Quistis is not. I feel like that's the most important takeaway. Is that one is a name and one is totally made up.